A $5 movie ticket is not coming back because the business that once made it possible has already disappeared. The marquee still glows, the popcorn still pops, and the seats look more luxurious than ever. But beneath that polished surface, theaters now survive by charging fewer customers far more money. So how did America's cheap night at the movies become an expensive, carefully engineered transaction? Every showtime begins with inventory that immediately expires because an empty seat cannot be stored, resold tomorrow, or moved to another location where demand is stronger. A theater must still pay rent, utilities, maintenance, staffing, insurance, and debt whether an auditorium holds 200 people, 20 people, or no one at all. Unlike a software company, a chain cannot double its audience without adding costly buildings, screens, employees, and equipment in entirely new markets. More locations may raise revenue, but they also duplicate nearly every major expense, leaving the industry with scale that often looks powerful while producing surprisingly weak economics. Theaters face another disadvantage. They do not own the films that persuade customers to leave home, drive across town, and sit in those expensive rooms. Studios control the must-see releases and typically collect a large share of ticket revenue before the exhibitor pays landlords, employees, lenders, or equipment suppliers. For the biggest titles, distributors can also demand premium screens, extended bookings, and favorable terms that reduce a theater's ability to replace a film when demand fades. Rejecting those conditions may protect margins on paper, but it can send customers directly to a rival carrying the blockbuster everyone wants to see. That leaves chains accepting agreements they dislike, because a weak deal on a major release is usually safer than having no major release at all. The $5 ticket fails inside this arrangement because the theater keeps only part of its price, while nearly every operating expense remains painfully fixed. Lowering admission permanently would not restore the old business. It would simply reduce the limited revenue available to support the building after the studio takes its share. That is why the concession counter matters so much, with popcorn, soda, candy, alcohol, and merchandise carrying margins that the admission booth cannot reliably produce. Theater food is not a secondary indulgence attached to the movie. It is one of the few products the exhibitor controls from pricing to presentation. A discounted seat must therefore be recovered somewhere else, through a larger drink, an online fee, a premium screen, reserved seating, or another carefully designed upgrade. For decades, that balance seemed sustainable because moviegoing was a routine American habit tied to suburban malls. Weekend dates, family outings, and limited entertainment at home. Banks financed a construction race as companies built enormous megaplexes, believing the newest property with the most screens could dominate an entire local market. The buildings became larger, the lobbies brighter, and the seating capacity enormous, but every new auditorium brought more debt, more overhead, and another room that needed customers. When attendance failed to match that expansion, chains discovered they had built too many seats for an audience already gaining better televisions, home video, and more entertainment choices. The correction brought bankruptcies, forced sales, and consolidation, allowing surviving companies to acquire valuable locations while weaker operators disappeared from towns and shopping centers. Yet consolidation did not fix the basic model. It concentrated prime territory among fewer corporations that still depended on studios, landlords, lenders, and unpredictable release schedules. By the next era, the chains could no longer grow simply by filling more ordinary seats, because attendance was weakening and their expensive footprints were already established. The new strategy borrowed from airlines: reduce basic capacity, create visible service tiers, and earn more from each remaining customer instead of chasing maximum volume. Rows of standard seats gave way to wide recliners, ordinary screens became the cheapest option, and premium formats turned superior sound and larger images into paid upgrades. Reserved seating, mobile ordering, cocktails, loyalty programs, branded merchandise, and renovated lobbies transformed admission from the final purchase into the beginning of a longer transaction. The cheap ticket was no longer the product chains wanted to maximize. It became an entry point leading customers toward a higher total spend. That shift matched an audience visiting less often, expecting more comfort, and needing a stronger reason to leave streaming subscriptions, large televisions, and familiar living rooms. Theaters accepted fewer annual visits because customers who still arrived for blockbusters could be charged more for format, convenience, food, beverages, and exclusivity. MC pushed this transition aggressively, replacing traditional seats with recliners while expanding premium screens, enhanced food service, and digital purchasing throughout its circuit. The goal was not to rebuild mass attendance, but to increase the amount collected from each guest who still considered a theatrical release worth leaving home for. Regal answered with its own premium formats, including motion-based and panoramic experiences designed to feel different enough from a standard screening to justify another upcharge. Competition did not make admission cheaper, because every successful improvement became a new expectation that rivals had to copy, finance, maintain, and eventually treat as standard. For more stories about American money, corporate power, collapse, and what remains afterward, subscribe to Fortunes and Ruins and continue with us. The premium arms race also exposed a crucial divide, because identical upgrades produced different results depending on rent, debt, geography, customer income, and local movie-going habits. MC occupied many valuable metropolitan markets, but those locations carried high costs and required enough premium spending to support a much higher break-even point. Regal appeared more efficient, yet Cineworld borrowed roughly $4 billion to acquire the chain in 2018, placing enormous debt behind its American expansion. When pandemic closures erased box office revenue, rent, and interest obligations continued, and Cineworld entered Chapter 11 before emerging in 2023 with reduced debt and new ownership. Cinemark followed the premium trend with a more disciplined model, emphasizing efficient suburban theaters, strong customer volume, simpler concessions, and markets where moviegoing remained a routine social activity. Marcus held another advantage by owning much of the real estate beneath its theaters, reducing rent exposure and supporting broader entertainment spaces with restaurants, bars, and arcades. The same films played across these companies, but their survival depended increasingly on property costs, financing access, local demographics, operational discipline, and per-customer spending. Pandemic shutdowns revealed that fragility with extraordinary clarity, because ticket sales vanished while leases, debt service, maintenance, and other obligations remained immediately payable. MC avoided bankruptcy after raising substantial capital from retail investors during the meme stock surge, turning unusual market enthusiasm into liquidity while its theaters struggled to recover. Cineworld lacked the same fundraising phenomenon, and the debt behind the Regal acquisition became far harder to carry once lenders faced a business without normal operating revenue. Regal eventually left bankruptcy with a reduced burden, but the strategy remained familiar: premium formats, higher concessions, selective closures, and more revenue from every customer who arrived. None of that recovery created room for a permanent $5 ticket, because creditors and investors supporting these companies expected stronger cash flow rather than cheaper admission. Studios had also discovered more attractive economics through streaming, where they could reach viewers directly, retain customer relationships, and earn recurring subscription revenue on platforms they controlled. Theaters remained valuable for spectacle, publicity, cultural events, and major opening weekends, but became less essential for the comedies, dramas, and romances once filling screens year-round. With fewer dependable mid-sized releases, exhibitors leaned harder on franchises, premium auditoriums, concert films, special events, and occasional titles capable of creating urgency. That dependence made revenue more seasonal and unpredictable, while major distributors retained leverage over the films theaters could least afford to lose. The modern theater now survives as a territorial middleman, renting costly space, licensing someone else's product, and trying to capture enough spending before each customer walks outside. A $5 ticket can still appear as a matinee, loyalty reward, promotional day, or tactical discount used to fill seats that would otherwise expire empty. But restoring it as the permanent standard would require cheaper buildings, lower debt, stronger attendance, better film terms, or customers willing to spend dramatically more elsewhere. The industry has moved in the opposite direction, toward fewer visits, premium pricing, consolidated ownership, costly technology, and constant pressure to maximize yield instead of volume. What looked like ordinary ticket inflation was actually the visible result of a decades-long transformation from mass entertainment into an expensive, occasional event. Share this story with someone who remembers when going to the movies felt routine, affordable, and far less complicated than the transaction waiting today. Then subscribe for more stories about the fortunes, corporate decisions, and broken business models hidden inside places Americans once took for granted. The $5 ticket is gone because the economy behind it is gone, leaving brighter screens, smaller crowds, and empty standard seats that cheap admission can no longer save.